So I have a very limited amount of time to film this video, so let's see how far we get. Hi, I'm Azaria. I am a creative writing student based in Nebraska. I write, I read. At the beginning of the year, I made a video about my goals and planning out my objectives for the year. And in that video, I said that I wanted to read a book per week in the new year. Thus far in 2025, I have been accomplishing that. In addition to keeping up with my reading for my classes and for the classes that I'm teaching, I am reading a lot on my own. It's currently March 1st, and these are the books that I've read thus far this year. There are two missing because I don't have physical copies of them. One is The Art of Scandal by Regina Black. The other is 1984 by George Orwell. I've been really enjoying reading this much kind of on my own outside of classwork. I told one of my professors actually that I kind of forgot how much I enjoy reading. Because it takes a while, I find myself pushing it down toward the end of my to-do list every day. And then when I finally get started on it, I'm always like, why did I avoid doing this? This is the best part of the day. So I can really quickly sort of go through the books that I read and give you my thoughts on them. First, The Art of Scandal is a book that Taylor actually recommended that I read. I told her that I wanted a kind of lower stakes, easier to read romance novel, and that's one of the titles she gave me. For the most part, I really did enjoy it. I had a hard time kind of getting into it at first because our main character immediately kind of gets her heart broken. And I have a problem with like reading novels that make me sad right off the bat. It kind of throws me out of the novel a little bit, but I'm glad that I stuck with it. I ended up really liking it, and it actually helped me with a romance plot that I've been trying to work out since my last year, my MFA program. 1984, I feel like everyone should be rereading 1984 right now. It's so apt for what's going on with everything. I read an article last week that said that some people are sort of rediscovering 1984 because they're on the right and they think it applies to the left, and then some people are rediscovering 1984 because they're on the left and they think that it applies to the right. Either way, look at 1984. It's prophetic. It's prophetic. It's a prophetic work, and it's just important. That's really all I have to say. The Rabbit Hutch is one of the books that I mentioned that I wanted to read this year, or reread because I've read it before. I still really love it, and I wanted to read it again because I'm working on my novel, and this book is just really weird but like genius. And a lot of the things that Tescati does in this book I'm attempting to do in my new novel. And so it was just really important to me to get a reread in, and I liked it even more the second time around. Temporary People is another book from that list of books that I wanted to read in the new year. When I tried to read it the first time several years ago when I first got it, I only got through a couple of stories, but this time I went through the entire thing, and it's brilliant. It's a magical realism story collection, and some of my classmates and I were talking about magical realism and how, because many people in America don't read international writers, so they don't read a lot of writers from Latin America, they don't read a lot of Middle Eastern writers, South Asian writers, Filipino writers. They kind of have a narrow scope for what's sort of pushing the envelope or what's experimental. And that's especially the case with magical realism. Magical realism writers in other countries are just leagues ahead of what magical realism writers in the States do. And this is just an example of that. It's very good. It's just a really good short story collection. All of the stories are like the perfect length. Yeah, I just really recommend this collection. The Dark Fantastic is more of a critical text, and I was reading it at first because I thought it would really apply to my dissertation project. The further I got into it, I realized that it didn't apply as much as I thought, but I still did really enjoy it, especially because it dissects a couple of properties I had never seen before. So it talks about Merlin, it talks about The Hunger Games, which I have seen but I haven't read, and it talks about Vampire Diaries and Harry Potter, and sort of the way that their token, for lack of a better word, characters are treated in the series, and then how those characters are treated by the fans. And it establishes the idea of the dark fantastic, which is just a way of interpreting how these characters are treated by the properties and by the fans. It's really interesting, and I would probably read this again, especially if I am able to find a way to make it more relevant to my dissertation project or to my research. Good Girl is actually a novel that I did read for class, but I'm looking at it again solo because I want to write a review for it. And it's a novel about a girl who is Afghan, and she lives in Berlin, and just about kind of the resurgence of white nationalism in Berlin, and how it's affecting her and how it's affecting how she interprets her own identity. She lies at several points in the novel about her heritage because she doesn't want people to think that she's a terrorist. She doesn't want to field questions about her upbringing just because she's from Afghanistan. She ends up getting involved with this guy who's just absolutely no good for her, and the novel is sort of about that relationship and how it forces her to reckon with her identity and sort of come into herself. I do think that there are a couple of things in this book that are kind of left to be desired, but overall I enjoy it, and most of all I enjoy the writing. I like the writing itself way more than the plot. This book is called The Original Black Elite by Azaria and Taylor, and this I was reading for my dissertation project, and I ended up just reading it again because I enjoyed it. And it's just about the Murray family, which was a prominent black family in DC. Right after emancipation, essentially, the sort of matriarch and patriarch, Anna Evans Murray and Daniel Murray, moved to DC. They met each other and they began their family, and they were really instrumental in passing through legislation, talking with council members, congressmen, the president at several points. They had several private conversations with Teddy Roosevelt, with Andrew Johnson, etc. And I believe they were also even instrumental in Plessy v. Ferguson, when there was an act that passed in Louisiana that Murray sort of helped choose Plessy as a test case that would bring that to the Supreme Court. And then of course we know Plessy v. Ferguson is the Supreme Court decision that established the separate but equal rule in the United States that would then later on sort of be gutted. This was a really interesting read, especially to sort of see the differing attitudes and beliefs within the abolitionist movement, within like the sort of black liberation, black equality movements that have sort of popped up and receded in different forms in the last several decades. Yeah, it was just a really enlightening read. And then this is sort of compounded with the book I read last year called Our Kind of People, which I read for the first time when I was in undergrad. And so it just sort of shows you the trajectory and the path that the Black elite has been able to take. This book is called Recognizing the Stranger by Isabella Hamad, who is a British Palestinian writer. And this book is essentially a transcript of a speech that Hamad gave in 2023 and an afterword. It's about Palestine and how our idea or our understanding of how narrative works limits our view of the Palestinian people and our complicity in the struggle of the Palestinian people. I actually read this book for a reading group that was put together by one of my former professors, but it wasn't like a school sponsored sort of thing. And it was a really great group of people that came together to talk about this work. And that's all I'll say about that, because Taylor knows I have some other opinions. Well, I actually also submitted a review of this book to a magazine, so hopefully that gets published. This book is called Blood in My Eye by George Jackson. If you don't know, George Jackson was an activist and revolutionary who was murdered in prison. And he was, I was going to say an honorary Black Panther, but he was just a member of the Black Panther Party. He was incarcerated when Huey Newton made him a member of the party, but he was a member, and he would write several articles for the Black Panther newspaper. I actually read this because it was recommended by a content creator on this website named Prince Shakur, and it was a great read, and I'm going to read it again very soon. The library is not getting this one back because I needed to read some more foundational texts to get me ready for this book. But this is just, it's about George Jackson's revolutionary ideas, about his relationship with his brother, and about just sort of his ideology and his methodological framework and how it impacted his action. Next, I read Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton, and this is just Huey P. Newton's autobiography, essentially. And it talks about how he was sort of born in Oakland. He was illiterate when he was in public school. Just because he had a hard time learning, he felt that the teachers did not know how to teach him and his friends. So he wasn't the only one that graduated not being able to read. And then you follow him through his journey, learning to read, learning more about theory, learning about dialectical materialism, which is kind of his calling card throughout a lot of his writings. And then you learn about a couple of the times that he was unjustly imprisoned, and how the Black Panther Party helped raise funds for his bond, for his attorney, and all kinds of other things. You also learn a lot about the 10-point program, the survival programs, things like that. And then last but not least, this one has a bunch of stickies in it still because I haven't taken my notes yet. But this is To Die for the People by Huey Newton again. And this one was actually edited by Toni Morrison, Random House. I think Revolutionary Suicide might have been as well because there's an ad in here actually for Revolutionary Suicide. So I think she also edited that one. And this is just a compilation of his writings. And I think that when you look at a compilation of all of these writings together, you can really tell exactly what his beliefs are. He repeats himself a lot just because he's really steadfast in what he believes and the way that he says that society works. And so this was also a really, really good read. As of right now, I have no less than 10 books stacked on my dresser that I'm attempting to tackle next. None of those books are books for my list that I wanted to read, that I told you about at the beginning of the year, but I do still plan to read those books. And I also have a couple of books that I have on hold at the library that I plan on tackling and hopefully writing a review for in the coming weeks. How are your goals? I hope they're going well. I hope you're meeting your reading and writing goals. Yeah, and I'm out of time to record this video. So thank you for watching. Have a great day.